Are you an avid TV watcher? If you are, then you'll know that many TV shows with amazing first seasons get cancelled way too often. The list of TV shows that got cancelled too early is an exceptionally long one, and it really hurts to think about. And you know what really hurts about those cancellations? The wasted potential. And this doesn't just apply to TV shows, it can apply to video games too. Imagine how good Sonic 06 would have turned out if it had been given more development time, or if Shun Akiyama from the Yakuza series actually got a game dedicated solely to himself. Yeah, that's right. I think Shun Akiyama is the Yakuza character with the most potential that just hasn't been capitalized on yet. But unlike those TV shows in Sonic 06, there's still a chance for Akiyama's potential to be seized upon. Yes, we could possibly still get that Akiyama game if we annoy RGG enough about it. But before I start doing that, I need to analyze why Akiyama has so much potential, and why all the games he's appeared in haven't properly taken advantage of that potential. So buckle up and get your popcorn and drinks ready, because this video is going to be one hell of a long ride with a lot of peaks and bumps along the way. So let's get into this character analysis of Shun Akiyama from the Yakuza series. Not much information is given about Akiyama's childhood and adolescence, but what we do know is that he was born in the year 1977, and after high school presumably, he enrolled at Tuto University and eventually got a law degree. After that, he started working for Tuto Bank, and at this bank, he started his career as one of the top young financial engineers in the industry. Around this time, he also started dating a fellow employee named Eri, and after some time, they eventually tied the knot. To put it in his own words, he was living on Easy Street. Until 2005. In 2005, he was accused of embezzlement, and after that, he was fired from his bank job. Apparently, a sum of 1 million yen was taken out of one of Akiyama's clients' bank accounts and deposited into his own bank account unbeknownst to him. The bank told him that they wouldn't press charges as long as he accepted his termination quietly. But that's not what Akiyama was about to do, because from his perspective, it seemed like he had been set up, but he didn't know who did it or why they did it. So determined to find out the truth behind this setup, Akiyama spent his entire life savings in the process of trying to prove his innocence. Eventually, his wife left him because, you know, the money started drying up, and his wife was basically a gold digger. And not too long after that, he ended up a homeless man living on the streets of Kamurocho. In December of 2005, a bomb explodes in the Millennium Tower, the tallest tower in Kamurocho. Because of this explosion, a bunch of money starts falling from the sky, the amount of money approximately being 10 billion yen. Akiyama managed to get 1 million yen from all of the money he was able to collect. And after that night, he figured that he needed to make more money because what he had collected on that night was barely enough to pay rent. So he got into day trading, and if you don't know what day trading is, Akiyama explains it himself. After doing that for a while, eventually the money just kept multiplying. And at some point, in his own words, he made a businessman's salary thousands of times over in only a few short years. Then eventually he starts a money lending company called Sky Finance with his former co-worker, Hana, serving as his secretary. Now with his backstory out of the way, let's talk about how we, as the audience, are introduced to Akiyama in the first chapter of Yakuza 4. Akiyama's introduction is probably one of the best in the whole series, which is why it's no surprise that this isn't the first time that I'm talking about his introduction, because I literally did that in the first Yakuza video I ever made on this channel, which you should check out if you haven't already, by the way. In that video, I break the introduction down shot by shot, but in the video you're currently watching, I'll give you the gist of why it's so good. It literally tells you almost everything you need to know about his personality, characteristics, and outlook on life with almost no dialogue. Before you see him even appear on screen for the first time, you see his messy office and his ashtray, and then you see him lying down on a sofa reading a magazine. Then his phone starts ringing, only for him to ignore it so he can take a nap. And then it starts ringing again, and this time he answers it reluctantly. You find out about all of his key characteristics in only just under 3 minutes, with a good portion of those 3 minutes not even featuring an on-screen appearance from him. It's a masterful introduction, to say the least. After the first 3 minutes, it's clear to the audience that Shun Akiyama is a very calm and composed individual who has a very nonchalant approach to life. Anywho, after he picks up the phone, we're introduced to Hana, his secretary.
そうだよね。はいはい。俺が悪かったって。で、何？
ですね。今日は何の日か知ってますか？
今日？今日は、君の誕生日か何か。
違う。いいから壁のカレンダー見てください。
So apparently Akiyama forgot that he had a debt collection to do today. And let me just say, I have mixed feelings about their dynamic with one another. On one hand, it's very funny, and on the other, it's actually pretty sad, as we'll see later in the game. So obviously, I'll elaborate further on this as we see more of Hana, but for now, I'll just say that it's very clear that Hana has more than friendly feelings for Akiyama, and Akiyama isn't necessarily oblivious to that fact. But one thing Akiyama was oblivious to, and isn't anymore because of Hana, is the fact that he has to make a debt collection today, and so that's what he does. The place he has to collect from is called Kanemura Enterprises, a third-tier Tojo clan Yakuza group that Akiyama lent money to some time ago. He eventually makes it to Kanemura Enterprises after noticing one of its members run into their office. And in the cutscene after that, we're introduced to 3 members of Kanemura Enterprises: Kido and, well, I don't think we ever actually got the names of the other 2 guys, but Kido is the only important character here anyway. So in this cutscene, we see Kido talk about how some thugs from a rival Yakuza group are causing some trouble at a bar Kanemura owns. We see Kido make a really interesting analogy to explain why the situation at the bar is much worse than it seems.
表面上は対等な立場。でも裏じゃ上の清和会も俺らと同じ傘下組織の一部ってわけさ。ま、例えて言うなら、東上会がアメリカで、上の清和会は日本みてえな感じってことだ。
That is easily the funniest analogy I've ever seen in a video game, and you can only understand it if you have a certain level of knowledge on Japanese and American history. I won't get too deep into it because it's out of the scope of this video, obviously, but just know that that analogy is very accurate. Anyway, after Kido tries to do some more explaining, that's when Akiyama comes in. As soon as Akiyama enters the scene, things get entertaining. He is very entertaining to watch with how he bounces off other characters, with how he utilizes psychological warfare, the witty remarks, and of course, those facial expressions.
回収がてら金村さんに挨拶していこうと思ったんだけどな。どうやら留守みたいだね。今日これから大変だぞ。あんたらの教会で下の連中が上の島で飲むなんてことはあってはなんないことなわけ。わかる？そんなヤクザまがいのやつにはもう上納金を立て替えるためのお金なんて貸してあげませんよ。金借りる時に約束した条件守ってくださいねって。
His screen presence is amazing. He reminds me of characters like Negan from the Walking Dead TV show and Alonzo from the movie Training Day, characters who are insanely telegenic. So much so that almost every scene they're in, with other characters, is an absolute joy to watch. But what differentiates those characters from Akiyama is the fact that they're played by their respective actors on screen. Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Denzel Washington make those characters amazing to watch. But with Akiyama, obviously his actor isn't on screen because he's Akiyama's voice only. And that just goes to show how well Koichi Yamadera's voice complements Akiyama's character design. Speaking of him, Koichi Yamadera is the perfect voice for Akiyama. You literally cannot separate the two. It's almost like he is literally Akiyama. Every line he delivers has this tinge of airy confidence with a good side of sexiness. It's chef's kiss. Anyhow, let's get back to the story. Kido and Co are really desperate for Akiyama to leave, and after he teases them for a little bit, he eventually leaves. Kanemura, the boss of Kanemura Enterprises, walks into the room.
親父いらっしゃったんですか。
いたよ。
いつから？
秋山のガキ帰っただ。
That jackass Akiyama? For some reason, the way he just insulted Akiyama is really funny to me. I don't know, but I guess I get a sense of schadenfreude from watching Kanemura voice his absolute disdain for Akiyama, because we as the audience obviously love Akiyama and we can't get enough of him, so it's very funny and interesting to see a character who just can't stand him. Anyway, that aside, Kanemura and his underlings talk about how they're going to handle the trouble those Yakuza are causing at their bar. Kanemura eventually leaves, going back to his office, and that's when one of the underlings asks Kido about who Akiyama really is.
さっきの秋山って人、何者なんすか？
ああ、あれか。
And that's when we get an exposition dump on Akiyama's whole shtick. Now, if you're a Yakuza fan and already know about what Akiyama's whole shtick is, you're probably wondering why I'm only talking about it this late into the video. You're probably wondering why I didn't talk about it in the backstory section. And I'll tell you, this is also when the audience is informed on Akiyama's whole shtick as a no-interest moneylender. If you're playing Yakuza 4 for the first time, you have no idea that Akiyama is a specifically no-interest unlimited moneylender at this point in the story. We're in the exact same position as the underling who asked Kido to give the exposition dump. And that's probably why in the next scene we get what is literally the best exposition dump in the whole series. Yakuza fans complain a lot about the overabundance of exposition dumps in this series, and rightfully so, but in this instance, it is literally done perfectly. Now, I'm going to read the translated transcript from this exposition dump word for word, and then I'm going to break it down piece by piece by doing a metatextual analysis on what Akiyama's character truly represents. The reason why I'm reading it word for word is because it is that succinct in how well it summarizes Akiyama's whole shtick. In other words, there isn't a better way I could have put it personally. Shun Akiyama, age 32. He runs a loan company called Sky Finance over on Tenkaichi Street. They call him the lifeline of Kamurocho. The guy lends money to people with nowhere left to turn. So he's a loan shark? Well, yes and no. I'm not sure he'd call himself that, but that's still spot on pretty much. Though I will say he's kinda different. His loan terms aren't exactly industry norm. Before Sky Finance lends out their cash, they need to see if the person they're loaning to is worth it. So Akiyama comes up with a test to figure out if they're up to snuff. Stuff like volunteering and helping out at nursing homes. Pretty weird if you ask me. What does he even get out of it? Well, no one really knows, and to add on to that, if the rumors are true, the guy doesn't charge a single yen of interest either. So how does he keep his business running then? Seems pretty counterintuitive, right? Well, that part is probably just an urban legend. He's probably got some kind of system. Plus, he drops in on his clients like he did to us today, making sure that they don't skip town if you catch my drift. He's probably easily the weirdest moneylender I've ever heard of. I can't get a read on the guy no matter how hard I try. All I know is that the people he lends money to once never borrow from him again. I'm not sure why that happens, but if I had to guess, they probably want to stay as far away from the nut job as they can. Now, that's a whole lot to chew on. I mean, where do I even start? Firstly, we need to contextualize Akiyama's character in reference to the Yakuza series as a whole. Yakuza 4, the game that Akiyama is introduced in, is the first one in the series to feature multiple playable characters. Akiyama is literally the first playable character that is not Kiryu that you play as. With that in mind, we have to understand how and why RGG went about trying to differentiate Akiyama from Kiryu, because before Yakuza 4 came out, players had obviously gotten very accustomed to Kiryu, so introducing a new character comes with a lot of requirements, like making sure that they feel like a breath of fresh air. To start, Kiryu was a dyed-in-the-wool, stoic, old-school Yakuza. He didn't have much of an education, and the Yakuza had been the biggest part of his life since he was virtually a teenager. This hardened him at an early age, and he eventually grew up to become an extremely strong and empathetic powerhouse that likes to solve the problems he faces with his fists, in a strong pursuit of a stoic sense of justice. He represented the ideology of an old-school Yakuza, and throughout all the games that he appeared in, he tried his damnedest to bring the Yakuza back to its former glory and principled days. And for the players, this basically made him a male power fantasy, and that's no mistake. The target demographic for this series has always been adult Japanese males. This is something that original Yakuza creator Toshiro Nagoshi never fails to mention in every interview he's had. So it's no surprise that Kazuma Kiryu is a male power fantasy. So what does that make Akiyama, the first protagonist that you play as that that isn't Kiryu? Well, I'd say he's also a Japanese male power fantasy, but of a different kind. Kiryu was a male power fantasy because of his immense strength and ability to blast through whole cadres of men with ease, not to mention his desire to protect those that can't protect themselves, aka that stoic sense of justice. Akiyama, on the other hand, well, he's a male power fantasy because of his money and wealth, and how he attained it, in the sense that he was in a very good position in life, then he had that position of life taken away from him by being fired unjustifiably, but then almost immediately got back up on his feet to eventually become the very wealthy owner of an insanely generous money-lending firm, probably richer than all of his ex-co-workers combined. If that isn't a male power fantasy, I don't know what is. And in order to understand why that's the case, we need to talk about the social value money and wealth have in Japanese society. In order to understand why Akiyama's rise from the bottom to the top, and then from the bottom to the top again, could resonate so deeply with Japanese men, we need to look at how Japan historically defined success, especially in the post-war era. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. And trust me, you will have a new appreciation for Akiyama's character if you just let me cook. So stay with me, okay? Okay? Okay. So basically, in the post-World War II landscape, Japan started to experience a period of economic prosperity, a time period that is known as the Japanese economic miracle. Lasting from the mid-1950s to the late 1970s, Japan's economy rapidly industrialized, and with that came the growth of its middle-class population and the white-collar work sector. I'm going to read an excerpt from an economics magazine called The Globalist. Quote, after World War II, a typical success story in Japan was easy to define. First, graduate from Tokyo University, Japan's most prominent national university. Then, work at the Ministry of Finance or at one of Japan's big commercial banks. Once you have been hired by a government ministry or a major bank or a major corporation, a rewarding career and a happy retirement were guaranteed. End quote. But along with this period of prosperity came the growing pains that Japanese society is infamously known for worldwide. The toxic work culture, the insanely long office hours, the chronic consumption of cigarettes and alcohol, all of what I just listed came to be associated with an archetype called the salaryman. During Japan's economic miracle, this archetype became associated with a male white-collar worker. Quote, salarymen are salaried workers in Japan's corporate sphere. They are expected to work grueling hours, including regular overtime shifts, and to prioritize their jobs and employers over everything else. Salarymen are expected to work for the same company their entire lives. They are rarely fired and receive rewards for their loyalty and good performance, though stressful working conditions and high-pressure corporate culture often counterbalance these benefits. The word salaryman can refer to a government employee and people working in business firms and or major corporations. Working in these demanding conditions for so long posed a significant risk and still poses significant risks today. The phenomenon of death by overwork, or karushi, became prevalent during Japan's economic miracle after World War II, with the first official case being reported in 1969. Japanese culture often makes it difficult for individuals to reject these norms, with appearance often taking precedence over everything else. However, these unfavorable work conditions contribute to the prevalence of karoshi, sometimes leading to karujisatsu, severe emotional struggles linked to work-related issues. It's unsurprising given that reported working hours often exceed 60 hours per week, not including unreported overtime. Although the official limit for monthly overtime is 45 hours, this has long been an issue within Japanese companies. End quote. This is something I've talked about before in my Ugliest Characters in Yakuza video. Make sure you check that out if you haven't already. Anyway, despite the supposed negatives, being a salaryman was still viewed as desirable in a post-World War II Japan. It meant that you had financial stability, given the fact that you worked for corporations that offered benefits like secure lifetime employment, and it also afforded you access to middle-class privileges like owning a home and starting a family. It was also viewed as the beacon of Japanese masculinity because of this. It would probably be accurate to label the position that Akiyama was in before he got fired that of a salaryman. To put it simply, Akiyama used to be a salaryman. I mean, he literally worked at a bank, and given how well regarded this position was, it's no surprise that Akiyama describes his time at Tuto Bank as being on easy street. But just like Akiyama's position at that bank, the positive perception of the salaryman began to change towards the end of this period of economic prosperity. Basically, the salaryman archetype began to take on negative connotations towards the end of this period of economic prosperity. This is also around the same time that Japan began to enter what's often referred to as the bubble era, to which if you've played Yakuza 0, you should be very familiar with that term and era. But if you haven't played Yakuza 0, well, basically, in the 1980s, Japan experienced an asset bubble in their real estate market, and it eventually bursted in the early 1990s. After the burst, Japan's economy began to experience immense stagnation, and the once aspiring image of the salaryman began to unravel. Quote, "The far-reaching economic, socio-cultural, and even political shifts that Japan has undergone since the bubble economy boom of the 1980s and the subsequent recession-plagued lost decade of the 1990s and 2000s have undeniably had major repercussions for the salaryman and his position within Japanese society. Many of the earlier assumptions associated with the salaryman, the guarantee of employment for life, promotion tied to length of employment rather than merit, and a paternalistic regard for the employee, for instance, became increasingly redundant as a consequence of the corporate downsizings and restructurings of the post-bubble years." End quote. And that brings us back to Akiyama once again. I think it would be accurate to say that Akiyama's character was created as a response against the valorization of the salaryman and the attitude change towards the salaryman after the bubble era. Akiyama used to be a salaryman himself. He went along the predestined path of going to a good university and then getting hired by a corporation that he hoped to work for the rest of his life. And just like what they experienced in real life in the 90s and the 2000s, he soon came to find that the salaryman wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. I mean, he was fired without warning. So much for permanent employment, right? And his wife left him as soon as the money dried up. Akiyama's character represents a pushback against the image and idea of the salaryman. And this is especially because of the position he puts himself in after losing his status as a salaryman. After he got fired, he found himself homeless. But after a stroke of luck, he was afforded the opportunity to build a new life. And after taking advantage of that opportunity, he didn't return to his old job working at a bank. Instead, he chose to start day trading, hoping to get another stroke of luck with no contingency plan. And that's exactly what happened. He racked up millions upon millions and decided to start a money lending firm that purports to give people a chance to achieve their dreams without the caveats of interest-based loans and amount limits, which basically goes against almost everything the salaryman stood for. The salaryman was all about stability, repetition, and routine, doing the same thing every day, 5, sometimes 7 days a week, regardless of whether or not you actually like it. Akiyama post-Sky Finance is the complete opposite of that, given how he is literally willing to bank on anyone, no matter how spontaneous they are, with no interest. He gives people the opportunity to achieve their dreams, beyond that of being a salaryman. This is not to mention the fact that Akiyama is a very lazy dude who likes to sleep a lot and doesn't have much of a schedule, constantly forgetting to collect the debts owed to him. He also constantly forgets about the days he's supposed to check on the people that have taken loans from him, and he has the power to grant anyone he feels seems fit for a no-interest loan, with only one caveat. That caveat being that you need to pass the tests that he gives you. He just does what he feels like with no constraints. He is literally the definition of a free man, and that's what makes him the ultimate Japanese male power fantasy. Akiyama is a response against the salaryman and a product of a 21st century Japan socially. And I think that's only one layer of Akiyama's character, and only one example of his connection to the salaryman archetype. There's a lot more to analyze, so let's get back to where we were in his story. After Akiyama leaves Kanemura Enterprises, he proceeds to go to the bar where those rival Yakuza are causing problems with the intention of dealing with them himself, and we get to see more of his signature cockiness.
こんな高い酒飲んじゃってこんなのこの店じゃ市場価格の4倍は取られるぜ。
誰だお前。ボーイって感じじゃねえな。
うめえ。こんないい酒浴びるように飲むなんて本当の酒飲みのすることじゃねえよな。
何しかとしてんだよ。俺らんこと舐めてんのか？
He takes care of them, and that's when a man named Arai walks into the room. And Arai is a character who is central to Akiyama's character arc in Yakuza 4. I won't go too deep into it now, but for now, just know that Akiyama really believes in Arai, and wants him to realize his full potential as the potential leader of Kanemura Enterprises.
なんで俺がこいつらと喧嘩したのか聞かないんだ。
うちの親父に金貸した時の条件が関係してるんでしょ
う。やっぱり知ってたんだ。
ええ。秋山さんともあろう人が何の条件もなしにうちの親父に金を貸すわけないでしょ
う。どんな条件か知ってる？
まあ直接親父に聞いたわけじゃないんですが、金村の引退ですよね。
This is definitely something I'm going to dive deeper into, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, Akiyama and Arai's conversation is interrupted by the dude Akiyama beat up. Then he threatens to shoot Arai, and he eventually does shoot Arai, which is very, very bad because that is not something you're supposed to do to another Yakuza that's a part of a rival faction to your Yakuza clan. Akiyama commands Kido, who I forgot to mention showed up in this scene a few moments ago, to follow the guy that shot Arai. Kido eventually reaches the guy, and that's when Arai leaves to help him. Akiyama, left alone in the bar, leaves to go back to his office, only to find the guy that shot Arai dead, seemingly at the hands of Arai.
秋山さん、あんたがくれようとしていたチャンス、どうやら俺はもらい損ねたようだ。それじゃ。
あれさん。
And the look of disappointment on Akiyama's face is very palpable. Not too long after Arai leaves, the police arrive and arrest Akiyama. And that's when Akiyama's first chapter in Yakuza 4 ends. And how my analysis of that chapter ends too. Now we're about to get on to analyzing chapter 2, which doesn't really leave you with that much to chew on or analyze, but still serves as a good setup for Akiyama's last 2 chapters, which do give you a lot to chew on. So let's get on to chapter 2. We interrupt this program to remind you to subscribe, especially if you want to see more media critical analyses of video game series including Yakuza, Metal Gear, Alan Wake, and many more. I'm always expanding the amount of different video game franchises I cover. Additionally, you should make sure you check out Season 1 of Yakuza My Newfound Love, the series, if you want to watch all the Yakuza videos I've made up until this point. Or you could just check out the playlist for character analyses if that's all you're interested in. And lastly, remember to like the video too on top of subscribing if you're feeling extra generous. With that out of the way, let's get back to the video. The next day, he wakes up in a prison cell and is eventually let out.
よかったな、目撃者がいて。あの可愛い顔したお前さんの部下の子に感謝すんだな。
Calbee Deluxe? What the fuck is a Calbee Deluxe? I've watched this scene multiple times and that question still pops up in my head, so maybe it's time I look it up. Let's go to Google to type in Calbee Deluxe. Oh, and the first result is actually from Steam, which probably doesn't have the answer I'm looking for, so let me scroll down a little bit. And, oh, it's a Korean type of beef. Anyhow, interesting insults aside, after giving Akiyama a diatribe and a back and forth between the two, the detective eventually reveals that Kanimura himself is dead.
金村が死んだよ。
いつ？
お前がぐっすり寝ている最中だ。
This chapter really gets going when Akiyama goes back to his office to do his usual thing of relaxing and smoking cigarettes, only for him to find an old picture of him and his ex after trying to look for a lighter. It's very clear that Akiyama hasn't gotten over Eri. Just in case you need a reminder, his ex's name was Eri. Yeah, just telling you that, just in case you needed a reminder. And in a weird turn of events, a woman who looks just like his ex walks into the room.
Hi.
And apparently this woman is here to request a loan. She's very secretive about who actually told her about Sky Finance, so Akiyama presumes that she got rejected by other banks, and that's what led her to Sky Finance.
多分あなたへの融資を断った同業他社の方にでも聞いたんでしょうから。 うちの店は金貸せないけど、あの店なら貸してくれるかもよって。どうせ他にもいろいろ吹き込まれたんでしょ。うちの店は同業の人たちにはあんまり評判良くないでしょうからね。
That's interesting. Sky Finance isn't popular among its industry peers? I mean, that makes sense given the fact that they're competitors, but Akiyama is implying that that's not the only reason they don't like Sky Finance. They don't like Sky Finance because they don't conduct business in a traditional way. And that just further proves my point that Akiyama really is a subversion of the salaryman and a response against traditional views around Japanese capitalism. Anyway, that aside, she eventually reveals that she needs a loan of 100 million yen within the next 10 days. On top of that, she doesn't have a guarantor and collateral. Now, that sounds preposterous, right? So much so that she tries to leave the room after realizing just how much she was asking for, but Akiyama stops her from leaving.
ちょっと待った。貸さないとは言ってませんよ。
And this is the first indicator that Akiyama is probably going to try to pursue a romantic relationship with this woman, which also means that this is the moment in which Akiyama's story turns into a little bit of a romance. And I must say that it's very strange and underbaked. At first, it looks like what could possibly be the beginning of a character arc, but it kind of just fizzles out by the end of Akiyama's story. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My main point is that it's just weird. Akiyama hasn't gotten over his ex, and then he comes across a woman who looks just like her, and then he tries to pursue a relationship with her. You can't tell me that doesn't sound weird. And if the way I just described it doesn't sound weird, then you'll see why shortly. Akiyama eventually agrees to grant this woman the loan she needs, obviously on the condition that she completes the 3 tests that he gives her. She then leaves the office only to be stopped by Akiyama because he forgot to ask her what her name is.
お名前聞いてもよろしいですか？
リリーと言います。
リリさんですか？それは本名？それともお店の名前？
言わないとダメですか？
いえ、いいです。
So in that very awkward scene, it's revealed that her name is Lily, and obviously Akiyama senses that something isn't right about that name, but because he's blinded by his love for his ex, he doesn't care. Anyway, regarding the tests he gives her, the first test that he comes up with involves a hostess club that he owns. He even calls the club telling them to rearrange everything and shuffle things around so they can be ready for her. After that, Akiyama meets up with Kido to have a chat. Kido then reveals that he was the one that found Kanemura dead, and that he found him dead with his shirt off and lipstick on his neck, which made him presume that a woman killed him. As they have their discussion, they're interrupted by some Yakuza. Akiyama beats them up, and then the police arrive. And that's when Akiyama runs away. He eventually arrives back at his office only to find Hana beating the shit out of some Yakuza.
あっちゃー、間に合わなかったか。命拾いしたね。
We then get a cutscene where we once again see the adverse side effects of Akiyama's chronic smoking. And that's how this chapter ends. There wasn't that much to chew on in it, but that's mainly because of the fact that I think this chapter serves as a good setup for Akiyama's last 2 chapters. We're introduced to his romantic interest, who looks very similar to his ex, and more is revealed about the mysterious circumstances surrounding Kanemura's death. At the beginning of Chapter 3, Akiyama and Kido find themselves in the Kamurocho police station. After chopping it up in the bathroom, they both leave the police station. Akiyama arrives at his office only to find the detective sitting on his couch. The detective tells him that Sky Finance is now being put under surveillance, to Akiyama's dismay. After quarreling for a bit, the detective eventually leaves, and that's when we see Lily again. So the first test is a date. Subtlety really isn't RGG's strength, is it? Anyway, in the next couple of scenes, we get to watch a man who is clearly struggling to let go of his ex. He literally buys Lily a dress, and after she puts it on, Akiyama honestly looks like he's about to bust one out.
Akiyama-san, 私
いいね。やっぱり俺の目に狂いはなかったか。いや、なんでもない。
And from that point onwards, it becomes obvious that Akiyama is using these tests that he gave Lily to spend more time with her. And she isn't completely oblivious to this. She knows something is weird about this Akiyama fellow, but it doesn't matter to her anyway because she's really desperate for that 100 million yen. But that raises the question, why can't Akiyama get over his ex? It's literally been over half a decade since they separated, and she was only in it for the money anyway. I mean, she literally left as soon as Akiyama's wallet went dry. She was literally a gold digger. What was so special about her? Did she have an extremely unique personality or something? The game never really tells us, but what it does tell us is that Akiyama is in need of love. And that's pretty evident in the scene that we see Akiyama and Lily in next. Later on, during the date, they find themselves on a rooftop, and they start to have a relatively deep conversation about money and what it does to people. And Akiyama says something that actually reveals a lot about his character in only 3 short sentences in response to Lily's question. Those being, quote, "Whether it's family or the one you love, it's tough to make anyone happy without money." Men tend to take that responsibility pretty seriously. We're all desperate to claw our way up to someplace stable. That's my theory anyway. End quote. And that right there, ladies and gentlemen, was somewhat of a commentary, albeit a bit shallow, on capitalism, particularly in a Japanese context. It is in these 3 sentences that Akiyama's past as a salaryman really starts to show, because everything he just said is indicative of the mentality of a salaryman. That need for stability and routine, and the guarantee that insert amount of money here will be deposited into your bank account by the end of the month. The guarantee that you'll be able to keep working at the company you're currently employed at for the rest of your working life, hopefully. But how do love and romance come into play? It's important to have a significant other by your side in the process of that pursuit of stability, right? Before Akiyama uttered those sentences I just read aloud, Lily started the conversation with, quote, "Why are men always so busy looking upward? They work themselves to death for that big break, and they end up forgetting the girl by their side in the process." End quote. And maybe that's true for a lot of salarymen, but not Akiyama. His ex had no qualms with Akiyama working his ass off, as long as the money was right, because again, she was literally a gold digger. So that means that Lily's perspective is one among many when it comes to how the supposed woman in a relationship feels with her working significant other. Anyway, Lily goes on to say that she wishes things never changed between her and her male counterparts from the past because of their pursuit of money. And Akiyama's like, doesn't that make you a hypocrite, considering the fact that you came to me asking for 100 million yen? And she's like, yeah, it's ironic, isn't it? And Akiyama closes the conversation with another really interesting statement. Life's good at throwing you curveballs like that. Makes you wonder though, why does money make the world go around anyway? End quote. Which is something that you may think is a really weird question for a moneylender to be asking. But it actually makes a lot of sense, because despite the fact that he's a moneylender, Akiyama's relationship with money is actually interesting beyond the surface when you really think about it. Money is extremely important to Akiyama. He heavily values money. But in this cutscene, he's showcasing that at the same time, he recognizes the harm that it can cause. But it really is only in this cutscene that he questions the true worth of money. In many of Akiyama's sub-stories, in Yakuza 4, he consistently reinforces just how important money is to him and his customers. There's one sub-story about counterfeit bills circulating all over Kamurocho, and it affecting Sky Finance's customers. And at the beginning of that sub-story, after finding out about the counterfeit bills for the first time, one statement he makes really illustrates how important money is to him. Quote, "The way I see it, fake money is like spitting in the face of everyone who puts in a hard day's work. And well, frankly, it pisses me off." End quote. And just judging by that statement right there, we know how he feels about money. By the end of this sub-story, he literally burns the fake bills while taking a smoke. Akiyama doesn't just hate fake money, he hates what it represents. The lack of effort and labor inherent in fake money, because to Akiyama, money represents hard work, which isn't too dissimilar from how most people in real life view money. But as Lily pointed out in that rooftop scene, this view of money is not without its problems. money isn't everything, and money doesn't always correlate with hard work or the amount of effort you put in it anyway, especially when it comes to how much one is paid for the job that they do, because there are many people that work extremely hard, but they get little to no pay. And money is literally the reason why gold diggers like Eri exist. I mean, he should know, just given the fact that his ex-girlfriend left him soon after he was fired, but I guess he just couldn't shake off that attachment to money, to which there are more examples of in Akiyama's other sub-stories, and some of them get kinda dark, and we see a very unsavory side of Akiyama, but we gotta get back to that rooftop scene. I apologize for that tangent. After Akiyama points out how life throws you curveballs, he goes in for a kiss.
金で人が幸せになれるんだったら、俺が君を幸せにできるのかな。
And she seemingly reciprocates. Obviously, that was something that Akiyama couldn't wait to do. And you gotta wonder, did he feel like he was actually kissing his ex when he did that? Anyway, after the kiss, they're interrupted by some Yakuza, and after eventually escaping from them, they call it a night at a playground. And that's how Chapter 3 of Akiyama's story ends. His final chapter is the next one. Remember Arai, the guy that Akiyama really believes in? Well, at the beginning of this chapter, Akiyama finally reveals why he believes in Arai and why he is adamant about helping Kido track him down. The chapter starts with Kido and Akiyama sitting down in the Sky Finance office. Kido keeps pestering Akiyama to tell him why Akiyama is putting so much stock into Arai, or else he won't help him look for Arai. And Akiyama finally budges in what's probably one of the most pertinent monologues in the whole series. But before he gives that monologue, he tells Kido about the time that Arai saved his life back when he was still homeless. When he was still homeless, he had to deal with homeless hunters, people who like to harass homeless people for fun.
ホームレス狩りとか言って路上で寝ているホームレスを襲うような遊びが流行っていたからな。
待ってください。それじゃもしかしてその時に秋山さんを助けたのが。
そう、新井さんだ。当時新井さんは金村工業に入ったばかりのチンピラだった。そのチンピラが俺から金を盗んだ連中から金を取り上げ、ホームレスの俺にわざわざ届けてくれたんだ。
どうしてそんなこと。
新井さんは涙を流して喜ぶ俺に言ったよ。俺がこの街を変えてみせます。
And it's after that that he gives that monologue that I was talking about. I'm going to read it almost word for word because it's just that good, and then break down how it encapsulates Akiyama's ideology. Quote, Kamurocho attracts all kinds of people. Weak, strong, you name it. It really is a jungle out there, but there's one thing that everyone who comes here has in common. A dream, or to be more accurate, yume. Every single person has some grand vision they're reaching for, whether it be landing the perfect woman, hitting it rich, seizing power. Everyone's got something, no matter how insignificant that something might seem. But barely a soul actually achieves it. Even so, people don't just abandon their dreams. They're what keeps us trudging onward. People want to see those dreams come to fruition. So what this town needs is someone who can show them that that's possible. For better or worse, strength is what wins people over, and Arai-san's got a lot of it, in spades. I've seen it firsthand. A jungle is not without its king, and this town needs a king now more than ever. Kamurocho has always looked to the Yakuza to find its lions. But Kazuma Kiryu's out of the picture, and nobody stepped up to fill the void. Without a leader, even the toughest prize will scatter and find a new king somewhere else. End quote. If you couldn't tell, Akiyama is a dreamer, in that he believes in the dreams of others and in their capacity to achieve them, which kind of aligns with the mentality of the old school Yakuza, which is why he mentions Kiryu, because Kiryu was, and is, by and large, a product of the old guard of Yakuza. And as I mentioned before, throughout the games that Kiryu has appeared in, we see him try to bring back and maintain that old school mentality in the Tojo clan, that protects the weak and fight the strong mentality. But by the time of Yakuza 4, He had given up and settled down in an orphanage he started. So basically, Akiyama thinks that Arai can be the next Kiryu, and that he can bring that old school Yakuza mentality back to the forefront and help make Kamurocho have an environment that is conducive to helping people achieve their dreams. And this is all because Arai helped a homeless nobody by beating the shit out of the assholes that like to harass homeless people. Exactly like what an old school Yakuza like Kiryu would do. And that is why Akiyama invested so much in Kanemura Enterprises. To Akiyama, Kamurocho is or can be a place where dreams can come true. It just needs a figurehead. This aspect of Akiyama's character kind of ties into how his character really is supposed to be a response against the mentality of a salaryman. Most Japanese people came to realize that being a salaryman wasn't actually that desirable, but it was still something that people nonetheless aspired to, even to this day. To quote the Yoko Gao magazine again, quote, "Being a salaryman was and is a respected career choice in Japan, a society still largely masculine. They embody the principles of dedication and hard work deeply, contributing significantly to the nation's post-war resurgence and economic strength." End quote. But despite the fact that it was and is a respected career choice, a lot of people had dreams of their own that transcended the salaryman, and Akiyama is here to help you achieve those dreams. But he also realizes that he can't do that alone, hence why he needs a Kiryu-like figurehead for people in Kamurocho to follow. That's where Arai comes in from Akiyama's perspective. So getting back to the story, what happens after Akiyama gives that monologue to Kido? Well, that monologue was so motivating that Kido immediately leaves to track Arai down.
要はそれくらい俺は荒井さんにかけているってことだ。
わかりました。俺、秋山さんの夢のためにも新井の兄貴を必ず見つけます。このお金はありがたく使わせていただきます。
おう、何か分かったら俺に連絡してくれ。
はい。
ただいま。あ、木戸さん。
あ、どうもっす。
Hana comes in and reminds Akiyama once again that he has a debt collection to complete, something he always forgets about. The place he has to collect from is called Mirimba, so that's where he goes. As soon as he gets there, he finds that the door to the place is locked, so he decides to leave, only to come across a place called Drama Queen. Now, I didn't mention this when I was talking about this scene, but when Lily first initially meets Akiyama, he notices that the lighter that Lily has the name Drama Queen written on it. He asks her if that's where she works, and she says yes. Got it? Okay, now with that in mind, it's no surprise that Akiyama is curious to look at the place that she works at, given that he's standing right in front of it, and obviously he has a humongous crush on her because she looks like his ex. So he tries to go inside, only to be stopped by someone that works there, who tells him that it's actually an Okama bar, which is basically the Japanese equivalent to a gay bar or just an LGBTQ bar in general. So he deduces that she lied about working there, given that she's not a part of that community. Wondering why she lied, he goes inside only to find a dead body inside there, and he finds the same type of lighter that Lily used. So he rushes back to Sky Finance only to find Hana lying on the floor. Before Akiyama arrived, some affiliates of Kanemura Enterprises' rivals came in and messed everything up, including Hana. So Akiyama eventually tracks them down, beats them up, and then finds out that they're after Lily, and that they knew Lily was going to be at Sky Finance. Now, why would they be after Lily? Well, if it wasn't obvious, at this point, it was Lily that killed that dude in the gay bar, and it was Lily that killed Kanemura. So now, Akiyama has a bone to pick with Lily. Akiyama makes it back to Sky Finance, and then gets a call from the hostess club telling him that Lily earned the required amount of money within the time limit he set. Wanting to see her dreams finally fulfilled, he makes an arrangement for them to meet on top of the Millennium Tower so he can give her the loan.
Yeah, 来たね。時間通り。
So they meet on the rooftop of the Millennium Tower, and Akiyama reinforces his perspective on money, telling Lily that he likes to see how money changes people's lives up close and personal. He also tells her that she doesn't have to pay it back, much to her surprise. And then he gets all existential, talking about how he's not a good judge of character, so much so wondering if he should even trust anyone anymore. It's a weird moment, but after that rant, he asks Lily to spill the beans.
どうしてリリちゃん、人を殺して回ってるの？金村工業の組長を殺したの君だよね。
違います。
大女優ってバーの店長もそうだろ。どうしてあんなことしてるんだ？
秋山さん。あなたはさっきお金を返さなくていいから教えてほしいって言ってましたよね。
ああ、そう言った。
じゃあお金は必ず返します。
なるほどね。だから教えたくないってことか。
すみません。
どこか行くの？
ええ。私にはまだやらなきゃいけないことが残っているから。
そうか。じゃあまたしばらく会えなくなるね。
はい。
わかった。じゃあ全てが終わったら貸した金返しにまた店まで来てくれ。
ええ。
また君に会える日を楽しみに待ってるよ。
And that's how this very short kind of love story ends. Akiyama is still a loner, looking for love. He just can't get over his ex, because that was the last time he truly felt love, ironically. And on top of that, Lily leaves Akiyama's questions unanswered, and he's fine with never knowing why Lily was a serial murderer. And I just gotta say, this was easily the most shallow and awkwardly executed attempt to build a character arc for a Yakuza character. There are all these other layers to Akiyama's character that I'd say are relatively well executed, but this isn't it. There really isn't any substance to Akiyama's and Lily's dynamic. It's literally just, I can't get over my ex, so I'm gonna take full advantage of a woman who looks just like her. Now, after this scene, RGG demonstrates that there is potential to actually make this character arc more compelling and substantive. That brings us to Hana. Or Hana. I don't know if I've been mispronouncing it this whole time. We're just gonna call her Hana. Okay, let's talk about Hana! So as you all know, Hana is Akiyama's secretary, and they're supposed to mostly be friends. They've known each other since Akiyama's salaryman days, as they both used to work at the same bank, and they were also just friends back then. But in the scene we're about to discuss, it's revealed that there's something deeper to their relationship. After leaving the Millennium Tower, Akiyama makes it back to Sky Finance. Hana is there, obviously, and he tells her that he is relieved to see her recovered from that knock to the head. And then she asks him about Lily and if he gave her that loan. And Akiyama's like, yes, and I don't think we're going to see that money again. And Hana's like, what the fuck, dude? You knew that and you still gave her the money? And then Akiyama's like, well, it's my company and I get to do what I want with my company. And then Hana runs away after shouting that she quits her job. Akiyama eventually catches up with her and they have a very illuminating conversation. And in that conversation, Hana hits Akiyama with the truth that he's trying to ignore. Ooh, Hana, you're telling him what he doesn't want to hear. And only you can do that because you know him best. She goes on to say that she needs to take a break from Sky Finance because she needs space. So Hana obviously has romantic feelings for Akiyama, and irrespective of what Akiyama thinks, they have the dynamic of a bickering married couple. Akiyama may not acknowledge it, but he needs Hana, and not just because he's lazy as fuck when it comes to running Sky Finance, but he low-key kind of has feelings for her too, and he just doesn't want to admit it. They literally have a karaoke duet song together, and just look at the lyrics. I mean, come on! come on! I really wish RGG expanded upon Hana's relationship with Akiyama beyond just implications, because she literally doesn't appear on screen again until the end of the game. And in the ending of Yakuza 4, she walks into the Sky Finance office with a new look.
すみません。ここんとこずっと秘書の子がいなかったもんで。ダメなんですよね。自分一人だと整理整頓もできないみたいで。
本当、私がいないと何にもできないんですね、社長は。
え？
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the classic trope of turning a previously fat character skinny. And hence, that means they're more attractive. So how does Akiyama respond to that?
Ah, そうだ。え？本来の特選焼肉弁当あるけど、食べる？え？そろそろ花ちゃんが帰ってくるんじゃないかと思って買っておいたんだよ。そんなに痩せちゃったらお腹も減ってるでしょ？ね？
社長。
I don't get it, man. Why is this dude so intent on ignoring his feelings? I guess he's just too afraid of a relationship based on genuine feelings, which is understandable, but you didn't have to do Hana like that. Hopefully they finally tie the knot in a future game. Wait. Wait, what? Hana doesn't make an on-screen appearance after Yakuza 4? Wait, you're kidding, right? God damn it, RGG! So even though Akiyama is in Yakuza 5 and Yakuza 6, Hana isn't in either of them. Well, she's technically in Yakuza 5, but in voice only. Now, why is that the case? Now, this might be hearsay, but her voice actress Aya Hirano found herself in a bit of a controversy back in 2010 when Yakuza 4 was released. Apparently, she openly talked about her dating and sex life on a Japanese variety show. And that's a big no-no when you're a voice actress or really a female entertainer with an otaku fanbase. And that's probably a part of the reason why Hana hasn't appeared on screen since her first depiction in Yakuza 4. Which is very stupid because that means we don't get to see Hana because of what essentially boils down to the Japanese version of incels. Why do incels have to ruin everything, man? But yeah, hopefully RGG can stick a middle finger up their asses and include Hana in the Akiyama Gaiden game that I really hope they make. So how does Akiyama's story in Yakuza 4 actually end? What happened after Hana ran away? Well, I'd say that Akiyama's story actually ends at that point. Yes, there's still a little bit more story after Hana runs away, but it doesn't really add that much to his character aside from the fact that it gives us a cool scene with his signature snark.
いや、送信ボタンを押したつもりだったんですが、押し間違っちゃったみたいで。
But by the time Hana quits Sky Finance, the last 20 or so minutes of Akiyama's story are just a setup for the next section of Yakuza 4, wherein you play as Saejima. And then we only see Akiyama again in Yakuza 4's finale. Now there are only 3 key scenes that feature Akiyama that I'm going to discuss from the finale, because in my opinion, those are the most relevant to his character. The first one features him and another playable protagonist in Yakuza 4, that protagonist being Tanemura. In the scene, they encounter Kiryu in the sewers. Kiryu is after a woman they're protecting because he's also meant to protect her, but Akiyama and Tanemura don't believe him, so they decide to fight him instead. And yeah, it's a bit contrived considering the fact that if Akiyama knows who Kiryu is, then surely he would know what he looks like. But RGG really wanted the new protagonists to fight the OG to signify the changing tide. I mean, Yakuza 4 was literally supposed to be Kiryu's last game, and he plays a relatively small role in Yakuza 4's plot anyway, so this boss fight is supposed to be indicative of that, and I think the shot that you see before you begin the fight is really cool. Now, the second scene in the finale that I want to talk about is the scene before his final boss fight with Arai.
ちょっと安心したよ。俺には人を見る目がないんじゃないかって疑心暗鬼になっていたんだけど、あんたはちゃんと野望を持った人間だったみたいだ。あんたが宗像を捨てたとこまでは認めてやる。だが人の金を使ってまで貫く正義なんてありゃしない。だから俺があんたを食い止める。
いいでしょう。
ほう、すごいね。俺に初めて出会った時から その覇気があってくれりゃこんなことにはならなかっただろうに。
もう時計の針は戻らないんですよ。後悔しても始まらない。
Now, why is Arai Akiyama's final boss? What even happened to Arai after he killed that one guy we all forgot the name of? Well, it's just like Akiyama said. He had ambitions that were greater than what Akiyama thought. Now, what were those ambitions? Now, prepare to be absolutely bamboozled by what I'm about to tell you, because Arai wasn't even actually a Yakuza. He was an undercover police officer pretending to be a Yakuza who's a part of Kanemura Enterprises. And he was being ordered by a guy named Munakata. And yeah, I'm not gonna do any more explaining beyond that because this shit gets way too convoluted. Just know that Arai wanted to go beyond both the police and the Yakuza. After Akiyama beats Arai in that fight, they share a moment of mutual respect.
あなたが利用してきた刑務所の中で一生この罪を償ってください。私も一緒にお付き合いします。
And that brings me to the last scene in the finale that features Akiyama that I want to talk about.
Akiyama!
秋山さん、
くそ！おい、秋山、大丈夫か？秋山！秋山さん！おい、秋山、どこを撃たれたんだ？大丈夫か？
あ、
どうした？
Saved by what he prized most. Now, I don't know if there's any other reason as to why RGG made this scene, aside from the fact that it's very symbolic to Akiyama's character, and it's an apt ending to his story in Yakuza 4. Now, I already talked about this scene when I talked about Hana, but I guess it's worth mentioning again. Akiyama's last scene in Yakuza 4 is the one where he pretends to be oblivious to the fact that Hana wanted to kiss him. So all in all, what do we take away from Shun Akiyama? Well, Yakuza 4 is his most comprehensive depiction. There is obviously a fuck ton to chew on, including but not limited to the fact that he serves the purpose of pushing back against the ideals of the salaryman and early ideas of Japanese capitalism so he can be a male power fantasy. His belief in the ability of others to achieve their dreams and Kamurocho as the #1 place to achieve your dreams prove that. His romance subplot wasn't very good, but there's potential for something much better. That's the key word. Potential. I really like Akiyama's depiction in Yakuza 4 despite its problems, but there's so much more that can be done with his character, especially within the context of the Yakuza series. He's not a Yakuza, he's a moneylender, which means his industry isn't necessarily crime, it's finance. There's even a sub-story where he's introduced to Forex trading, by scammers of course, since it's a Yakuza sub-story. And also, given the fact that finance can be connected to crime, as Akiyama has shown us, there's a lot of narrative potential there. Imagine a financial crime thriller with a bit of romance featuring Akiyama and Hana, of course, that tackles how corrupt and criminal the financial industry can be and its connection to other international criminal entities like the Triads or even European mafia outfits. That needs to be a guiding game. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Yakuza 4 isn't the last game Akiyama is in, but his appearances from here on are going to be way more shallow. Akiyama's appearance in Yakuza 5 is interesting to say the least, because he's kind of just there to babysit Haruka and be his usual cool self. He doesn't experience any character growth whatsoever in this game. But don't get it twisted, that doesn't mean there isn't anything substantial about his appearance in this game, especially given the fact that Yakuza 5's thematic focal point is dreams, or Yume. If you've played Yakuza 5, you'll know about the character Mirei Park. and you'll also know about the fact that fulfilling Park's dream is central to Haruka's character arc in Yakuza 5, and it's Akiyama that helps her realize that. Now, I won't go too deep into what Park's dream actually was and the motivation behind it. If you want that, go watch my video dedicated solely to her. But these are the cliff notes. As a former Japanese idol, she always wanted to perform in a huge-ass concert at the Tokyo Dome to an audience of thousands, but she never got the opportunity to do that because of very unfortunate circumstances. So she decides to start a talent agency to manage future female Japanese idols so she can live her dream vicariously through them. And one day she finds Haruka, and she believes that Haruka will be the one to ultimately fulfill her dream. She's so confident in Haruka that she goes to none other than Sky Finance for a loan to fund that huge-ass concert at the Tokyo Dome. She obviously does all the tests that Akiyama gives her and completes them with flying colors, as Akiyama describes it, and then he grants her the loan. She uses the loan to plan the concert and sharpen Haruka's skills, but then Park is suddenly murdered, and that leaves Haruka alone without someone to actually help her continue Park's dream until Akiyama comes along. And for the record, Haruka doesn't know that her idol career is essentially just a vessel for Park's dream until Akiyama reveals that to her. And after her death, Akiyama and Haruka engage in a murder mystery investigation to find out who actually killed Park, while Haruka still continues her idol activities on the side. And there are a few cool moments that come from this murder mystery, like the scene where he tries to interrogate one of the people he suspects is involved with the murder, that person being Katsuya.
あんたが彼女を殺させたのか？
なぜ私が？
あんたの事務所とダイナチアには朝からの因縁がある。それに現に今もプリンセスリーグでしたっけ？確かあれでお互いの秘蔵っ子同士が争ってるはずだ。
だから私が殺したと？少し冗談はお控え願いたい。
パクさんの遺書を偽造したということについては？
さあ、わかりませんね。ただ私もこういう仕事ですから、いろいろな人間と関わることがあります。もしかしたらその中にパクさんの死に関わっている人間がいたのかもしれない。ただ私には全く関係ないことだ。どうぞ。これでお引き取りを。
The camera work in this scene accentuates the tense trivia show-like atmosphere between the two as they try to figure each other out. Akiyama knows that he's hiding something, and he knows that Akiyama knows that. And Akiyama isn't being extremely accusatory either, giving him a little bit of leeway. In short, it's a very fun scene to watch, and it's one of Yakuza 5's finest moments. There's another cool, well, maybe cool isn't the right word. Funny is probably more accurate. There's a really funny scene where Haruka makes the dumb decision to meet a Yakuza on her own, and as soon as things go south, Akiyama comes to the rescue just in time.
よし、ほな行くで。ちょっと待った。
秋山さん。
ああ、もう走るとしんどいね。もうタバコやめるか。
And he's right. He really does need to stop smoking. It's one of those salaryman habits that he just can't shake off. Old habits die hard, I guess. Aside from that, it's also worth mentioning that Akiyama is very adamant about making sure Haruka fulfills Park's dream.
そうだ。それをやらなきゃ意味がない。なんとしてもパクさんの夢を叶えてやらないと。
Which is just a reinforcement of his perspective on dreams and his willingness to realize the dreams of others. Closer to the date of the Tokyo Dome performance, Akiyama and Haruka leave Sotenbori for Kamurocho. By the time they get there, Katsuya contacts Akiyama for a proposal, and then they cross paths in his office again. Katsuya offers 500 million yen to Akiyama to cancel the Japan Dome concert because Katsuya, who's actually a Yakuza by the way, knows that his patriarch is planning on murdering Haruka. But since Akiyama doesn't know that, and Katsuya isn't the most transparent guy, Akiyama responds with a resounding no.
当然ですが断ります。はるかがドームのステージに立つことはパクさんの夢でもあるんだね。
じゃあそのためなら大阪芸能いや 大阪工業を敵に回してもよいと？
ええ、もちろん。
When he gets back to the Sky Finance office, he encounters a strange fellow who's there to ask him for a loan.
ちょっと何あんた。
ちょっとってもう2時間以上ここで待ってたんすけど誰もいなくて。
お店の人ですよね。
ああ、そうですけど。
Now, that was a really fun character interaction. Personally, on my first playthrough of Yakuza 5, it was a joy to watch these two characters I've spent a hell of a lot of time with interact with each other. And this is the feeling that Yakuza 5's finale gives me in general. That feeling that you're being rewarded for all the time you spent playing as these characters throughout the game. It's like everything's coming full circle. It's very satisfying. And Akiyama and Shinada bounce off of each other very well, I'd say. Now, the rest of Akiyama's time in Yakuza 5 is spent trying to make sure that Haruka performs at that Tokyo Dome concert, and figuring out why some parties are out there to stop that from happening. And there's some funny scenes we see along the way. And eventually Haruka does perform at the Tokyo Dome, but while the performance is happening, different parties try to disrupt it, including a Yakuza clan called the Omi Alliance. Well, technically in Yakuza 5 there's actually infighting going on in the Omi Alliance, and you know what, actually I won't go into it because, again, like almost every Yakuza story, it's convoluted. But after Akiyama defeats one of these factions within the Omi Alliance, led by a guy named Kanai, who is actually his final boss, we get a cool scene where a bunch of Yakuza bow down to Akiyama as they thank him for defeating Kanai.
近江連合は今日までただの一度も頭を下げたことはない。それが近江が最強たるゆえんや。せやけど今日だけは頭下げさせてもらう。秋山藩、世話になった。
That's definitely a moment Akiyama won't forget. It's also Akiyama's last key moment in Yakuza 5, and overall, I'd say his depiction in Yakuza 5 was cool, but it's a shame that he doesn't have any sort of character arc in this game. He has cool scenes, but we don't get to see Akiyama experience growth. His whole ordeal with Park reinforces the key aspects of his character, and there are some really cool scenes that depict his snarky signature attitude, but it's nothing extremely substantial. And given the fact that Yakuza 5 is just a huge game, I guess I can understand why they didn't give Akiyama that much to do or that much of a character arc, because the game was already bloated as it is. Nonetheless, it is still another example of this character's missed potential, and his appearance in Yakuza 6 exemplifies this even more. It's been 5 years since the events of Yakuza 5 took place, and in Yakuza 6, Akiyama is in dire straits. In Chapter 1 of the game, we find out that Sky Finance is temporarily closed, and that Akiyama is living in a tent located in a sewer. Now, why is he in such a predicament? Well, Kamurocho has changed, to say the least. It's much more dangerous to live in the city now that a Chinese criminal organization called the Salient has taken over key parts of the city. And this is especially dangerous for Akiyama because he runs a credit company known for lending money to the Yakuza, who are rivals of the Salient. And so this led the Salient to hunt Akiyama down, and that's why he's been living in a tent in a sewer, so he can hide from the Salient and one of its most prominent members. His name is Ed, and Ed is a fascinating character. He's basically Chinese Shimano. He is cartoonishly evil, so much so that it's actually funny to watch him do evil things. I think I must be fucked in the head because the scene where he slits someone's throat kind of made me laugh.
これが採用界ボスからの答えです。
Anyway, that aside, at the beginning of Yakuza 6, Ed is basically Akiyama's arch nemesis. He's the main reason why Akiyama hides in the sewers. Now, before they encounter each other again, Kiryu returns to Kamurocho after another stint in prison. And he returns to Kamurocho specifically to look for his adoptive daughter, Haruka. The first person he thinks of asking is, of course, Akiyama, given the fact that he spent the whole of the last game babysitting her. Much to the audience and his surprise, he finds out that Akiyama is living in the sewer, and they have a bit of a reunion.
スカイファイナンスは閉めたんだってな。
まあなんでか中国マフィアに目をつけられちゃいましたね。とりあえず休業中です。このままずっと引き下がってるつもりはないんですけど。
話は聞いてる。いろいろ大変らしいな、今のカムロ町は。
ねえ、町がこんな状態なんで秘書の子も一旦里に返しました。商売上がったりなところにあの子まで危険にさらすわけにはいかないもんで。
And then they find out that Ed and the Sayotrads were following Kiryu. Because of that, Akiyama's cover is unfortunately blown. And we get another reunion now with Ed and Akiyama.
見違えたな、秋山さん。前からおしゃれだったが、もう私のような凡人には理解できない着こなしだね。
After they take care of Ed, they get out of the sewers. Akiyama gets some sunlight for the first time in a while, but his joy is interrupted by a phone call from Date to Kiryu, where he tells Kiryu that Haruka has been in an accident and is in the hospital in intensive care. They both rush to the hospital, only for Akiyama to be stopped from entering the hospital.
すみません、患者さんですか？でしたらご遠慮ください。衛生的に問題がありますので。
Which is interesting because what if he was having a stroke or something? Would they still stop him solely because of his clothing? Just a thought. Both Kiryu and Akiyama eventually find out that Haruka now has a child named Haruto. And since Haruka is in intensive care, this child is currently without a caregiver, which puts him in the crosshairs of Japanese child protective services. Kiryu, knowing this, decides to take Haruto with him when he leaves the hospital. But Akiyama gets in the way.
すいません。でもはるかちゃんが目を覚ますまでは仕方ありません。赤ん坊はしかるべきところで預かってもらうしかないでしょう。
もしはるかに万が一のことがあれば、この子は。
何言ってんですか、桐生さん。そんなことにはなりませんって。
だがそうなった時には、ハルトは間違いなく施設に送られる。そして赤の他人の俺には、この子がどこの施設に送られたのかも決して明かされない。二度と顔を見ることさえできなくなる。子供が施設に入れられるってのはそういうことだ。その後俺がどうあがこうが、もうこの子には何もしてやれなくなる。はるかも絶対にそんなことを望まねえはずだ。はるかが目を覚ましたら必ず返す。それまで俺に任せてくれ。
やっぱりダメですって桐生さん。下手したら誘拐犯になります。もしそうなったら俺ははるかちゃんに合わせる顔がない。何のために無所に行ってたんですか。
止めるな秋山、行かせてくれ。
In this scene, Akiyama and Kiryu argue about whether or not Haruto should be absorbed into the adoption system, possibly never to be seen again, or if Kiryu should take the baby with him. Akiyama is worried about what could potentially happen to Kiryu, specifically about the prospect of Kiryu getting arrested for kidnapping, and hence, never seeing Haruka again. And because of that, Akiyama is willing to sacrifice Haruto's life for Kiryu's, and Kiryu is willing to risk his own life for Haruka and Haruto. So, who's more in the right? Yakuza 6 is posing a very interesting moral question here, and personally, I'm kind of more on Kiryu's side. But that's because even if you're playing Yakuza 6 for the first time, you know that Kiryu is going to be fine, even if he kidnaps Haruto because of his plot armor. So in that case, the writers technically think Kiryu is more in the right. Because after Kiryu successfully takes Haruto away from the hospital, after a fight with Akiyama of course, there aren't any consequences that Kiryu faces for it. The game kind of just forgets about the fact that Kiryu kidnapped a child. Technically. Regardless though, it was still an interesting moral quandary. Now, after that fight with Kiryu, Akiyama takes a backseat from Yakuza 6's story until the midpoint of the game, but for the time being, he continues hiding in the sewers. Now, given his situation, knowing Akiyama, you may ask, if Kamurocho is too dangerous, why is he living in a tent in the sewer? Why doesn't he just hide in a different part of Japan? He did send Hana to the countryside, or why doesn't he hide in another country for that matter? Akiyama has shown in the past that he has the ability to speak English.
Good timing.
Now that I think about it, I think the answer is pretty obvious. It's his belief in Kamurocho as the place where dreams come true. Later in Yakuza 6, as soon as Kiryu returns to Kamurocho after dealing with some business elsewhere in Japan, he needs intel. Akiyama knows this and contacts Kiryu, telling him they should meet in a hotel where Akiyama is disguised as a window cleaner because, you know, Kamurocho is still extremely dangerous for him. When they meet, he gives Kiryu the intel, but he also once again reinforces a key aspect of his character.
Kamurocho は今めちゃくちゃです。俺がスカイファイナンスを再開しようにもこんな状態じゃどうにもならない。
スカイファイナンスを。
俺はこの町を生かす夢を持った人間に金を貸すためにスカイファイナンスを始めました。どん底だった俺を救ってくれたこの町に恩を返すためです。ところが東上会と中国マフィアの抗争に加えてジンゴン派が町中の風俗店を買い占めています。ご存知かどうか、スターダストもその餌食になりました。
ああ、聞いている。
こんな時にもし希望があるとすれば、堂島の竜が今またこの町にいるってことです。
だが俺は
分かってます。桐生さんが構想を収めるために来てるわけじゃないってことは。ただそれでも俺はあなたには期待しちゃうんです。
It seems like Akiyama still believes in the Dragon of Dojima to be the leader of the jungle that is called Kamurocho. Remember his monologue about dreams in Yakuza 4? I'm seeing a through line here between Akiyama in Yakuza 4 and Akiyama in Yakuza 6. What Akiyama just said to Kiryu is eerily similar to what he said to Kido in Yakuza 4, but the difference this time is that he's put all his faith back in Kiryu to save Kamurocho, given how Arai is out of the picture now. To which, speaking of him, did Akiyama just completely forget about Arai? Yeah, he went to prison at the end of Yakuza 4, but we never get an update on him after that. Wouldn't Akiyama keep in contact with Arai, given just how much he banked on him in Yakuza 4? I mean, he literally believed that Arai could take Kiryu's place. Maybe he was just disappointed in Arai, after the fact that he was actually secretly a police officer was revealed. Anyway, tangent aside, in Yakuza 6, it's clear that Akiyama still thinks Kamurocho needs saving, and needs a king to be at its helm, because he still truly believes that it could be the place where everyone can go to achieve their dreams. But that sentiment doesn't really hit the same anymore, does it? We're not in the world of Yakuza 4 or Yakuza 5 anymore. I mean, just look at Kiryu's reaction. At this point, you could say that Kamurocho is kind of beyond saving. It's not the same place that it was all those years ago. It's been kind of gentrified. It's lost its authenticity. It's lost the flavor it used to have with that old, rugged look. It's more pristine and embellished. And you could chalk that up to the inevitable developments of late-stage capitalism. Remember how I said that Akiyama as a character is a response to Japan's era of stagnation and the death of the salaryman? Well, that era of stagnation never really ended. Japan's economy still hasn't rebounded, and I think that just illustrates the parallel between real-life developments and what happens in the world of Yakuza. When you really think about it, Akiyama still thinks Japan, specifically Kamurocho, can have another economic miracle, another era of prosperity where people can easily achieve their dreams again. And he believed, and still probably believes, that he could do that with Sky Finance, hoping to find someone who can save Kamurocho and then give them a loan. But if Kamurocho needed that in Yakuza 4, why does it still need it in Yakuza 6? Wouldn't it be saved by now? Why is it taking so long for Kamurocho to become the place that Akiyama thinks it can be? I think what Akiyama said to Kiryu in that hotel illustrates that not much has changed between Yakuza 4 and Yakuza 6, and in essence, Akiyama is still holding on to this dream that really is just that, a dream, aka the opposite of reality. He's still dreaming and not living in reality at this point. Kamurocho has changed, and the Yakuza have clearly changed too. And Akiyama is refusing to recognize that, which is why he is once again betting all his cards on a reluctant Kiryu. And he reinforces this once again after finding out that Kiryu was planning on killing someone.
殺そうとしてたんじゃないかって。違いますか？もし堂島の竜が人殺しに手を染めれば、カムロ町はもうあなたをボスとは認めなくなります。
俺を持ち上げんのはもうやめてくれ。ほら、カムロ町どころか身の回りの人間を守ることさえできねえ。ただのヤクザ崩れだ。
なんて言われてもあなたを諦める気はありませんよ。岩見恒夫と菅井がカムロ町にいればもうこの町は死んだも同然です。今この町にはあなたの支えが必要なんですよ。それだけの歴史をあんたは今までこのカムロ町に刻んでしまったんだ。
I guess you could say Yakuza 6 might be a rebuttal of sorts to Yakuza 4 and Yakuza 5, given how it's depicting Akiyama to be relatively delusional to the realities of 2016, the year that Yakuza 6 takes place. And maybe that's not a negative thing, because at the end of the day, he wants Kamurocho to be a place where people can easily achieve their dreams. But where Akiyama gets it wrong is by thinking his credit company and an individual like Kiryu or Rai can make that happen. And maybe that's something that Akiyama can learn in a potential guiding game. Like seriously, that needs to happen. I will happily give RGG my idea for an Akiyama Gaiden game without hesitation. At the end of Yakuza 6, Kiryu fakes his death, and Date is the supposed witness to his death, quote unquote. As in, he essentially watches Kiryu sign his death certificate. So nobody but Date knows that Kiryu faked his death, right? Well, no. Since Akiyama is not an idiot, he meets Date at a bar to question him on what really happened to Kiryu.
桐生さんのことですけど、伊達さんは本当にあの人の遺体を間違いなく確認したんですか？
ああ、そうだ。
Akiyama knows that Kiryu isn't dead, and he hopes one day Date can tell him the truth about what really happened to him. And after that conversation, Akiyama leaves the bar, which caps off Akiyama's last major appearance in a Yakuza game. Yes, he's in Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, and we'll get to that, but that's not a major appearance given the fact that he's not even in the main story of that game. Yakuza 6, as of October 2025, is the last Yakuza game to give Akiyama major involvement in a Yakuza game's plot, and I'm using the word major generously here because he doesn't actually do that much in Yakuza 6. It's nice that we get to see a through line between his appearance in Yakuza 4 and this game, which signifies that RGG's writers have not forgotten about Akiyama's key characteristics, unlike a certain other Yakuza character. And it's cool that we got to fight him in the hospital over an interesting moral quandary, but aside from him reinforcing that he still believes in Kamurocho and Kiryu, he's kind of just there in Yakuza 6, and barely so. But I guess it's understandable given what Yakuza 6's plot actually is. What more could Akiyama have done anyway without making him a playable protagonist? Not an easy question to answer, right? So Akiyama makes a brief appearance in Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, the latest Yakuza game, and it's in an optional side quest. That side quest is a part of Kiryu's bucket list. For context, in this game, we find out that Kiryu has cancer, and because of that, he chooses to do some things that he's always wanted to do but never got the chance to. And Date hears about this and then decides to help Kiryu with this bucket list by pairing him up with individuals that he's had a very huge impact on. And then Akiyama hears about this too, and then finds out that Date and Kiryu are doing this in the city of Yokohama, and then surprises them by going there.
秋山、お前何を？
人をバカにしすぎでしょうが！あんたら二人して。あんたが簡単に死ぬ玉じゃないってな、俺にしてみれば分かりきったことです。案の定、大阪で東上会と近江連合が解散した時は死んだはずの桐生一馬が出てきたって聞きました。きっともう何かしらほとぼりが冷めたんだと思いましたよ。ところがまたそれっきり音沙汰なしです。桐生一馬の復活は都市伝説じみた噂でしかなくなった。俺にも何一つ連絡なし。極道じゃないから部外者ってわけですかね。
So for more context, it's been 7 years since that conversation that Date and Akiyama had in the ending of Yakuza 6. So what's Akiyama been doing for the past 7 years up until he meets Kiryu again for the first time in ages? Well, apparently he left Kamurocho around the time that the local government enacted the Kamurocho 3K plan to crack down on crime. And since Akiyama deals with individuals involved in crime, he felt it was necessary to leave and then manage his money somewhere else. Now, Akiyama tells Kiryu, Date, and the audience all of this very casually. This is the same guy who would give you a monologue on how much he believes in Kamurocho as a place where dreams can come true, and how this city literally saved his life and helped him escape rock bottom. And he just casually tells us that he had to leave the city due to shifting politics.
俺の扱う金はグレーゾーンの部分も多いもんでしたね。それを守るために世界中に分散させる必要もあった。
I'm just saying, it's a little bit strange that he's so casual about it, given that he loves Kamurocho, so you'd think it would pain him to leave, right? I don't know, man, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Anyway, Akiyama also implies that before he left Kamurocho, he fell in love with a woman once again and proceeded to pursue her all the way out of Japan.
ご存知かどうか、俺は女の子に惚れっぽくて、その子を追っかけて気がついたら遠い異国の地です。
Wonder if it was another lookalike of his ex-wife. Nonetheless, after leaving Kamurocho, he spent some time traveling the world, and apparently one of the destinations was Singapore, which is actually a very fitting place for Akiyama as a character to be, because Singapore is literally one of the financial capitals of the world, so he would definitely have a lot of business being there. And there's definitely potential for a guiding game with that premise, but again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Now, presumably he went to other countries too, but it's not specified where. In fact, him being in Singapore was actually a rumor, and it's something that Akiyama neither confirms nor denies.
で、行き着いた先がシンガポールか。
さて、シンガポール？誰がそんなこと言ってるんです？
え？違うのか？
違いますね。だからって本当のことも教えませんけど。
But let's be honest, he was definitely in Singapore, and then he came back to Japan after hearing about Kiryu and Date being in Yokohama. After Akiyama airs out his frustration about Kiryu keeping him in the dark about faking his death, they have a reunion that's pretty rewarding to watch as a Yakuza fan who's played all the games up until this point.
俺は今日、会えてよかったと感じてますよ。ずっと胸に使えてたもんが溶けて消えました。少なくとも、会わなきゃよかったなんてことは断じてありません。 あんたさ、桐生さん、俺の人生を変えるきっかけをくれた人なんです。
And there's Akiyama doing what he does best, venerating Kiryu.
じゃ、とにかくこれで仲直りの乾杯でいこ
う。いいですね。そうこなくっちゃ。
まあ、とりあえずな。
And that's where Akiyama's brief appearance in Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth ends. Aside from the nice reunion and him being in Singapore, there's nothing else to say about his appearance in Infinite Wealth. As I've demonstrated in this video, through analyzing this Yakuza character, Akiyama is a character with a lot of potential. His appearance in Yakuza 4 was very eventful and explored many salient themes that said a lot about Japanese society and the value of money, but it could have done way more with its awkward romance subplot, and there's not much of a character arc that he goes through, aside from what he does with Arai, which kind of fizzles out too. His appearance in Yakuza 5 had a lot of entertaining scenes and many examples of him showcasing the key aspects of his character, but it most certainly did not take full advantage of his character. His Yakuza 6 appearance, while very sparse, was a nice way to depict how his constant emphasis on dreams could be to his detriment sometimes because of how it kind of blinded him from the reality of an ever-changing Kamurocho and Japan. But that's just one layer of his character, and that's the only layer of his character explored in Yakuza 6. And there's not much I can say about his appearance in Infinite Wealth. You can see the through line. Missed potential. There's so much more you can do with him, and I think you, dear viewer, should agree with me now at this point. And that leads me to the part of this video that was the most fun to make. It's what you've been waiting for, and it's going to be on what RGG could possibly do next with Akiyama. So all I'm gonna do is conceptualize the premise for what a hypothetical Akiyama Gaiden game can look like. I could go deeper into this in a separate video altogether, so if you're interested in that, please tell me in the comments. So the setting is Singapore, and since Singapore is a city-state, the city that the game will take place in will literally be called Singapore, because that's its name in real life. But since RGG likes to keep their open worlds very small, it would have to be a specific section of the Singapore city. So I'm gonna go with what's called the central area in the Singapore city, which is what you're seeing on screen right now. And it makes more sense anyway because it's the financial center of the city. Now, I must add that the game also has sections in Yokohama and Kamurocho, of course. Now, what about the characters? Well, the game obviously features Akiyama as the sole playable character, Hana, and an out-of-prison Arai. So those are older characters, right? What about newer characters? Well, I won't go into the deets, but obviously there'll be like 2 or 3 main villains, like with most Yakuza games, and they'll probably all be played by and modeled after famous Japanese actors. Akiyama is probably also going to need a companion who can speak both English and Japanese fluently, given the fact that Singapore is an English-speaking country. Now, that companion also works in finance, and he has ties to organized crime. Now I'm going to explain the plot. The game takes place in 2018. Due to the Kamurocho 3K plan implemented by the newly elected Ryo Aoki, Akiyama has to move his immense wealth elsewhere and temporarily close Sky Finance once again, but only in Kamurocho. He opens another branch in Yokohama where the crime laws are a little bit more lax. He also rehires Hana as his secretary. They do business as usual, lending to people who have dreams that they want to achieve, until an extremely attractive, half Japanese, half Singaporean woman who may or may not have ties to organized crime in Singapore comes into his Yokohama office looking for a loan to start her own fashion company. And of course, Akiyama gives her 3 tests he deems fit. I won't go into the specifics of the tests because again, I want to keep this brief. So all we're gonna say for now is that she completes the tests and then leaves Japan. Akiyama, completely enamored with her, decides to follow her all the way to Singapore. Before he does that, Hana scolds Akiyama for once again blindly following a woman he doesn't know. And then Akiyama gives the excuse that he can manage some of his money in a place like Singapore. And then he leaves for Singapore. Pretty solid premise, right? I can't go deeper into it because this video is already long as it is, so please, if you're interested in a video by me solely dedicated to my idea of what an Akiyama Gaiden game can look like, please comment your desire for me to make that video down below. And if I see enough demand, I'll definitely do it. On that note, I'd love to see everyone else's ideas for a hypothetical Akiyama Gaiden game, so please also comment about that. Because if there's one thing you should take away from this video, it's that when it comes to how potential can be seized upon, there are an endless amount of ways you can do that, because potential is truly endless. And we all have it. Akiyama will definitely tell you that, because he believes anyone can achieve their dreams, if they find the right person to look up to, or if they put in the work. It's a bit cliche and maybe too meritocratic, but his heart is in the right place, because at its core, that sentiment is not harmful. We should all try to reach our full potential and achieve our dreams. And hopefully RGG can do exactly that with Akiyama's character one day. Hey you! Do you want to hear what Akiyama sounds like with an English voice actor? Well, here you are.
Not every day someone holds their own against white masks, let alone this many. And after seeing you fight, there's no mistaking it. Do me a favor and be up front, eh? Kiryu-san?
Weird.